Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. And my guest today is Dale Graff. He is the author of Tracks in the Psychic Wilderness, an exploration of ESP, remote viewing, precognitive dreaming, and synchronicity. And also the book called River Dreams, the case of the missing general and other adventures in psychic research. So that's a huge, vast conversation that we could have, but today he's here to talk about precognitive dreaming. Welcome, Dale.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and thank you for driving from Pennsylvania to be here. I appreciate that. So I don't know a lot about this subject, so maybe you could just start by telling us, what is precognitive dreaming?
Well, first of all, we have to ask ourselves, what are dreams?
Okay, yeah.
And dreams are that mental experience that we have when we're asleep, and imagery comes into our perceptual field of view in our subconscious mind. We wake up and remember it and say, oh, I had this image, I saw something. Well, that's sort of what a dream is. It's mostly imagery, but it can be sounds or feelings or a number of other kinds of perceptions. Now, precognitive dreaming is a parallel to the way we normally dream. Most people dream about 20, maybe 15 minutes a night. They just don't remember it. And it's called rapid eye movement dreaming, REM dreaming. And this fact was discovered in 1952 by researchers when they were looking at people in a sleep laboratory.
So I want to stop you here for a second. So only 15 minutes? I'm shocked because when I wake up in the morning, it feels like I've been dreaming all night. So we go into REM sleep. Is it every hour? And
REM sleep is cyclic. Initially, we'll drop off very deep, at a very deep level. That's a different kind of stage, they call it, stage 3 or 4 REM.
And do we dream in each of those?
Yes, we do. We don't remember them all.
Right.
And now, when we do remember the ones in the deep stages, normally we call them a nightmare because they're more dramatic and they're more troubling to remember. And it's really more troubling.
Right.
It's going to a deep level of the subconscious. But then after that, there's cycles that go on, and it could be a few minutes here, and a few minutes there. And
so then how do we take the leap from that to, now that we know what dreaming is, what is precognitive dreaming?
Yes, well, that's a good question. Now, normally the dreams that we have are a huge spectrum of possibilities. They can be very random. They may be things we remembered the previous day coming in. Or it might be a dream that relates to a relationship, for example. We remembered something that we forgot the birthday present or whatever, and the dream reminds us. Or it could be something that's very significant to us in our professional life.
Right.
And a creativity kind of thing. If you're an artist, you might think of some kind of brilliant image to paint and wake up painting it. So you have a whole spectrum of possibilities that we can remember if we so choose to do so.
Right.
Now, the precognitive dream is a variation of this. And this is a dream that has imagery and other sensory inputs as well, but it relates to something that we're going to experience in the future. In other words,
do we know that when we're dreaming it?
When we're dreaming and we have an experience that seems unusual, it's not the normal memory that we have.
And it doesn't feel like typical dreams.
That's correct. Now, the precognitive dream normally, for most people, will be very brief and to the point. There's no extraneous material in there. You know, you're not going back and retracing your steps to the grocery store, for example.
So, for example, what would be a precognitive dream that you've had?
Oh, I've had quite a few, and I recorded them. And this is a key thing. Anyone that wants to really take this serious, and I think we all should, begin recording them. Now, some of my
begin recording them is when you wake up and you remember them.
Yes.
And you take a
you write down notes, and then as soon as you are active in the day, as soon as you wake up in the morning, write it out in detail and do a sketch. But some of the precognitive dreams I've had relate to moving. You know, I'm now changing jobs. I'm looking for a house, an apartment, and I'll have a dream.
So before any of this is actually happening in your life?
Yes. You're right. The only thing that triggers the key to the need, here's a key word. A precognitive dream usually occurs when there's something that we're missing in our lives, or there's a need, or there might be some medical situation coming into fore that is not even discovered yet by a doctor. So we may have a dream about that pending situation. But in the case I was talking about, I had this particular dream of coming into a particular area of Washington, D.C., looking around. This is a month before I even moved there, many years ago.
But had you planned to move to Washington?
Yes, at that time I did.
Okay.
And this is the thing, when we're moving around, or when we're changing jobs, or when we're really active and transient in our lives, things are changing, and we anticipate what might be around the corner. We wonder what's going to happen the next day. We wonder what is it that what kind of place are we going to find to rent or buy or whatever it is. So in this particular situation, the dream presented a picture in my dreamscape space of a very exact building in a certain position. And it was so unique that I knew that that had to be relevant to something, because it had nothing to do with my current life. So about a month later, here I am walking around the streets of Washington, and here I find an exact looking building. And it was just perfect for what I was looking for at the time. So I had a glimpse ahead of a place that I would eventually find and then move into.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you here because, of course, a million questions come
Sure.
up.
Mm-hmm.
But where is this information coming from? Is it coming from some subconscious memory? Is it maybe you saw a picture of that building? Is it maybe your subconscious telling you this is what would be ideal? Where is this information originating, or is it out there in the ethers?
Many times a dream will look like it's precognitive. Like you mentioned, a memory of a picture you saw. Yeah, I'd like to have a place like that and move there. Sure, you will have dreams like that, that's certain. But in the case I'm talking about, it was very unique. There was no other building that I had even looked at that could even qualify as matching that building.
So how do you explain that?
Now, your question, where is the information coming from? This is a big issue. And this is, you're not getting to the point of why this phenomenon, and I call it a phenomenon because we don't fully understand it, why this is being ignored by science. Because it doesn't fit any way of explaining. It's beyond any rational concept that we have. And how do you explain this kind of experience? Think about extrasensory perception, which is related to that. Mm-hmm. And the research went on for decades down at Duke University in the 20s and 30s. It demonstrated a real effect statistically. Mm-hmm. You know, they were using card guessing type of protocol, so you could do statistics on that. But the dreams I'm talking about are very specific, and they have imagery. And then where does the information come from? Where does any information come from that's coming into our psychic nature? And that's basically what's at the bottom level of the experience, our psychic substructure of our subconscious mind.
So I'm going to stop you here for something because I want to clarify. Yeah. But it's interesting, I'm just going to interject. Sure. Years ago I interviewed someone who, I think it was just a few days before 9/11, he saw it happening in a dream. Yes. So you would call that a precognitive dream?
Yes, I would do that.
Okay.
Yes.
So when you say a psychic nature, so what does that actually mean?
Well, the word psychic normally refers to information at the deep psych level of our subconscious. A part of that has to do with information that's outside of any kind of rational awareness. The extrasensory part I'm talking about, the precognitive parts I'm talking about. So whatever this nature is, it's not within any way we can explain it. Most researchers today think of this as something from the future, that a future actually exists that we tap into. So you asked about the source of the information. So I'm saying one way of perceiving or understanding precognitive dreaming is to say that there is a future that exists somehow out there, and we just tap into it and have a dream or an intuition or a premonition about that future.
So, I mean, it's mind-boggling, but I want to ask you something. So, you know, the whole concept, I mean, I'm aligned with the possibility of all of it. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk to you about how we can use this. Yeah. But I remember as some years ago thinking, you know, if I could watch a movie of my life, but in condensed version, it would be very easy to predict my future. You know, if I watched every frame by frame, there is a predictable future for all of us, just because of the way we operate. So we all have a predictable future, I think. Is it just someone who can, during the dream, you're able to tap into that predictable future because of who you are in the present? or is it an already existing future that you're living into?
Okay, well, the way I look at it is there's several kinds of futures. One is the predictable kind.
Right.
No, I know I'm going to go to the grocery store at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Okay, that's a given. Okay. So there are trends and there are patterns. And if you study anything about astrology, they say there are other overlying patterns that govern our lives. So I don't know exactly all about that, but that's a concept. But the futures I'm talking about are the very specific ones that are unique, and they're not dependent upon a particular trend or a life pattern. The issue of finding that apartment building that I told you about earlier, that was not dependent upon the fact that at some point in my life I would be moving to Washington, D.C. So this is a very specific add-on to the overall trends and patterns that we all have. Sure, if I go back and look at my life, I can see very interesting correlations to a projection I could lay on it. World War II was a big influence on me. The Vietnam War was. So these are outside factors that drive our lives. But within that are these experiences that we all have, and they can be quite vivid, and they can be quite reliable as well, that occur in a dream state.
So again, just getting down to practicality. So it sounds like, what if you, because I'm thinking, well, do we want these? And because you said we should pay attention to them. Do we want them? Do we all have them? And then is there anything we can do about them?
Okay, let's start with what do you want?
Right.
Now I think you're getting to a reason why. There are not too many people want to really look at this, because a lot of people that I've talked to over the years feel reluctant to even say, yeah, I want to have a precognitive dream. There's it may be a little bit of fear. It may be a little bit of peer review pressure. When I started becoming more public with these experiences, I was not about to talk to them with my scientific colleagues, because I'd be ridiculed. Okay, so that tends to suppress, and even in cultures or in families, one of the spouses or one of the husband or wife might not think highly of this experience, so the child that's having them is not going to have them. Tell them. So there's a cultural element here that causes a resistance to not wanting them. And sometimes there's a psychological theory involved. And if you study Sigmund Freud, he was concerned that dreams were all pretty much something repressed from the subconscious, even though later on in life he became very interested in ESP. He just, in fact, it didn't even get into the early biographies about him.
Right.
So
but then Carl Jung addresses the kind of cumulative consciousness.
And Carl Jung, a contemporary of Freud, then comes in with the idea that not everything is suppressed and hidden, like Freud was saying, but that there are underlying motives and forces within our subconscious mind, our deep psyche, if you will, that eventually surface and drive us in certain directions. Somebody who has suppressed an artistic talent, for example, will all of a sudden have a really powerful dream, and I got to paint that, and maybe start a new career, or a musician. I have friends that are musicians and actually dream music and wake up and write the music. So there's something that can bubble up within ourselves, and this driving factor will overrule all the negatives. Now, and other negatives, in addition to the scientific, or sometimes we're resistant to talking about them because we fear being wrong. And not everything that happens to us in life is going to be nice and correct. Even a so-called precognitive dream, and we don't know if it's precognitive until the event can be verified. So whenever we have a dream that looks unusual, intriguing, it's fast-paced, it has a very specific, clear message. It's not tangled up with a lot of memories that normal dreams have. And we say, that's likely a precognitive dream. You don't know for sure. So you record it, and hopefully you would, because your memory sometimes is not very good. And then you go back and either forget parts of it or add to it that wasn't there. So then the event happens. Now you can say, yes, that was a precognitive dream. Now the next step is, how unique was it? Could I have predicted that in some other way? because I've been reading something about that carnival coming to town and the tiger getting loose, you know. And people have had dreams like that. You know, a tiger runs through their dreams, and no reason why it should be there until they realize it escaped from the zoo. And that actually is dreams that have been recorded and sent in to people that collect them.
So what's the use of all of this?
Well, that's a good question. Now, it varies. I think if we have to think about evolution and go back to early primitive times, and the possibility of sensing what's around the corner or what's coming ahead had a survival advantage. So I think, and many colleagues of mine do, and researchers as well, that we're looking at a remnant from way back when we were as a tribe, as an individual, a herdsman, whatever, we're in a survival mode. We had to go a little bit beyond the ordinary senses, even though they could be developed far greater than today, you know, in terms of smelling and listening, whatever. This is the next step, and it aided our survival. Now, that's true now today. We look at what can the information help us with. And certainly it can be survival. If taking the more dramatic turn of events, what might happen in a dream, and this happened to me. This is one of my dreams that's been recorded and published. I had a dream about my wife's car exploding. And okay, that's not a good dream. It's brief, to the point. Why should I have a dream like that? You know, the first thing you do when you have a dream like this is look at it from a psychoanalytical point of view. Fire, what does that mean to you? It's an anger, you know, energy. No, we weren't angry at one another at the time, nothing like that. So I checked her car, which I didn't drive very often. I couldn't find anything wrong with it. And yet I had that nagging feeling that, no, why did I have a dream like that? So this is where intuition now comes in. If I hadn't had the dream, I might have had an intuition about it. I took it to the garage, and a day or two later, the mechanic calls me and says, "It's good you brought that in, because you were driving a time bomb." It turned out the car, that particular car, had a fuel pump in the gas tank. The wires had shorted out, and had I allowed the gas to get too low, the fuel-air ratio in there could have ignited.
Wow. So,
true, it didn't blow up because I was able to stop it from blowing up by having the part replaced. So this raises an issue. If I stopped it from happening, was it precognitive? Because, you know, then it didn't happen. Well, that depends how you look at the term. If you look at precognitive experiences, whether it be in a dream or a hunch or a premonition, these are likely situations. It doesn't mean it's absolute. It's
not written in stone.
Correct. And we have the option of intervening, and that goes back to your question, what good is this? So we can stop the perceived future if it looks threatening from happening. And this, I'm not the only one who's had these kinds of experiences.
Sure.
There are some. But the other value of this is in the health arena. So I like to think of precognitive dreams and other dreams as being our best health management system, because we are monitoring ourselves all the time subconsciously. And if there's something bubbling up that we need to pay attention to, it will be presented in dreams. Will we remember them? That's the key. Now, there's a thin line between, is this precognitive, or is this drawing on something that's already in your body at a very subtle level that's not being amplified and presented in the dream? Well, it doesn't matter how you look at it. It's going to be, could be life-saving.
Right.
And I've had colleagues that have had dreams like that, and the doctors didn't believe the description. You know, I have a pain in my neck. You got to really be looking at it. Something, the dream shows a knife going into my neck. That's not a good dream. And so you pay attention to that kind of dream. And after 3 or 4 times, going back for another exam, they finally discovered the thyroid cancer. It was early on, was not detectable. So
it wasn't necessarily literal.
No. Oh, no. Yeah, that's a good point. Many times, the way the information is presented to us, it could be a mixture of literal and symbolic. Most of the time, in my experiences, and those of my colleagues, it's been really literal, right to the point. The dream is what it pretends to be, what it illustrates to you. But then there are times when it becomes symbolic, and I think that's to make us realize this is not something that we are anticipating because we ate too much last night. You know?
Right.
This is something extraordinary. This is really getting to the point, so to speak, of what's going on.
It's interesting because, again, you could look at it from a psychological point of view, you know, looking at dreams and what they mean, interpretations, etc. But I remember decades ago, I used to have a theme dream that kept reoccurring, not insistently, not all the time, but I remembered them often enough, and they were about being in the ocean and being carried away and getting ready to drown, and the fear and everything else. And then what always happened in the dream was I thought, well, okay, let it be, and I would just give into it, and then I would survive.
Yes.
So would you describe that as precognitive, or?
No, it could be, but basically a dream like that would be like an invitation. It was get over fears. Don't be concerned about your subconscious material. You know, it's learn to handle it. And in fact, there might have been something in your life at that time you were resisting the idea of inner explorations, for example. So a dream like that many times comes before other more powerful experiences.
Right.
And I've had friends that have gone through a process which is called a Kundalini awakening. It's a Sanskrit term, or Hindu term rather.
Yes.
Having to do with these energetic forces bubbling up, and the chakra concept comes into play here. And a person going through that many times will have dreams of drowning or being caught up in a tornado or a fire.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because it has to do with the transformation concept.
Right.
You have to transform something. It could be simply a worldview, an attitude, or a connection with something in the past.
Right.
So at a more mundane level, a woman might dream about a husband being on fire, or something burning up in the house that they live in. So this is probably a relationship dream, that there's trouble in the relationship. It's not precognitive, but it can relate to something like that if there's something very specific there, a real threat.
So what I get is you're saying it's useful to pay attention, and because it can be telling you something. So I have a couple of other questions. I think the term, and we sort of have touched on it, but the term is very intriguing. Can the future influence the past as a retrocausation effect?
Yes, okay. Retrocausation, okay. Now moving a little bit into physics language here. There are some ideas in physics having to do with waves or probabilities that exist out there in the future. The waveform that sometimes referred to as everything has a wave particle duality relationship. But the idea of retrocausation is going back to the concept of there's a kind of like something we can call a future. Now, whether or not that is information that's assembled from all known sources of information that we have, your mind, my mind, the insect's mind over there in the corner, and all into one huge cosmic mind.
Yes.
So that would be one way of looking at it, if you want to keep mind in the picture, that we think of as mind, as where the information is. Or that, in addition to that, this is projected into some space, some kind of alternate reality, if you will, where it exists almost as if real, like a duplicate of this universe, of this reality. So it's that duplicate out there in some kind of cyberspace or extraterrestrial space, if you will, that is there. So if that exists in some context, it has a realness. Now, will that information there, or will what's going on in this future activity, then the idea is that can be perceived by you and I, which again is like what I was talking about, precognition, and it can influence us whether we realize it or not. You may not even remember the dream or the experience, but you may get up and go and do something that day or whatever. Well, maybe there was something in the future that you related to that was transmitted from the future to your subconscious mind that had to take, you took that action. A good examples of this.
We love examples.
are synchronicities. These are my favorite kinds of experiences. Now, how does a synchronicity occur? It's like a combination of precognition, whether it's awake or dreaming. And there's something in the future that we need to find or navigate toward. So that information is there, and we somehow sense that. And then maybe you have a certain interest, I have a certain interest, and the key is how are we going to meet one another to resolve that interest. So you may have a hunch to go somewhere. I may wonder why I got off the subway at the wrong place, and there you are. So how did this come together? So there was a need that you or I had felt deeply in our subconscious mind that reflected off something in the future that showed a possibility. So that potential future then exists out there. The key is how do we get together? So at a subconscious level, you had the information, I had the information, and we did things subconsciously that allowed us to meet. So in that sense, the future influenced us now. Now, there are other ways of looking at this. There are experiments where individuals are in the laboratory and a certain physiology parameter is being monitored, like the polygraph idea. And they're being monitored in 3, 5, 10 seconds from now. A photograph will be flashed, okay? Now, they're told in 3 or 5 seconds you will be looking at a certain picture. And that picture could be non-emotional or it could be very emotional. Okay, so you start the experiment, you're being monitored, and maybe 1 to 2 or 3 seconds before the picture is shown, you have a response. So it's as if you are already there looking at the picture.
Wow.
Or the picture information has come back from the future into your subconscious mind, and it caused that reaction. And so what I'm saying is there's an interaction that's going on all the time between our subconscious mind and whatever you perceive the future to be.
Dale, I hate to tell you this, but we're at the end of our time.
Oh,
and this is, we ended at a great place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a subject that, you know, we can explore endlessly, but how intriguing and filled with possibilities.
Sure. And there's so much here for science, also religion. Some religions need to take a hard look at this whole area. And of course, my big thing is for the individual. This is really where I'm coming in. What can the individual do?
Yes.
And it's really, you already have it. All you have to do is awaken it, exercise it, pay attention to it. You already got it. Why squander it?
Yeah, I like that.
That's my point.
That.
Why squander this talent? Because it can help you out in a lot of ways. And not all precognitive dreams are going to be spectacular and powerful like 9/11.
But they can be useful.
But there are little things that come in that add up, and they're useful. And then they also, the big point that I think is, they let us know that we live in a really unusually incredible universe. We haven't begun to tap into the mysteries behind it and understand it the way we like.
Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us.